Welcome, enlightened ones. Let's elevate. Some of you grew up knowing early that you were on your own, not because someone sat you down and explained it, but because life showed you. You felt it the first time you needed something, and nothing showed up. No backup, no steady reassurance, no one consistently checking in to see if you were okay. Just silence, and responsibility landing on you far too soon. You learned how to handle things because you had to. You learned how to keep moving because stopping didn't feel safe. You learned how to rely on yourself because relying on others wasn't an option. That kind of upbringing leaves a mark, not always visible, but deeply embedded. It shapes how you love, how you trust, how you ask, how you endure. Having no support throughout your life can either forge you or fracture you. It can sharpen your awareness or turn your nervous system into a battlefield. It can teach you leadership over your own life or lock you into survival mode long after the danger has passed. Same absence, same lack, different outcome, and the difference isn't personality, it isn't intelligence, it isn't luck. It's the direction you take once you recognize the truth, that you were under-supported, that you carried more than you should have, that you figured things out alone that most people were guided through. Some people discover that truth and let it become their explanation for everything. They say it quietly, they say it loudly, they say it internally every time life gets uncomfortable. This is why I'm like this. This is why I can't change. This is why I don't try. Others discover that same truth and let it become a turning point. Not in a dramatic way, not overnight, but with a firm internal decision. This is where it stops. They don't deny the pain. They don't pretend it didn't matter. They don't rush forgiveness. They simply refuse to let their origin story dictate their ending. And that's where the path splits. Right there. Between becoming defined by what you didn't receive, or becoming deliberate about what you give yourself now. This isn't about blaming the past. It's about reclaiming the future. Because once you see it clearly, once you name the lack honestly, you no longer get to pretend you're powerless. You get to choose. And that choice is what we're here to talk about. And from that choice forward, life starts responding differently. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because you stop negotiating with environments that were never designed to support you. When you've lived without support, you develop a high tolerance for discomfort. You stay longer than you should. You explain more than necessary. You accept less than you deserve, not because you don't know your worth, but because you were trained to survive without reinforcement. You learned how to keep going without applause, how to keep producing without encouragement, how to keep loving without reciprocity, and for a long time, that looks like resilience. But unchecked, it turns into self-abandonment. Because there's a difference between being strong and being accustomed to neglect. People who had support often don't understand this. They don't understand why you don't ask, why you hesitate to lean, why you stiffen when someone offers help. They interpret it as pride, but it's not pride, it's conditioning. It's what happens when support was inconsistent or non-existent, when asking led to disappointment, when needing something made you feel like a burden, so you adapted. You stopped needing out loud. You stopped hoping publicly. You learned to hold it all yourself. And here's where the path becomes dangerous if you're not conscious. Because the same traits that helped you survive can sabotage your future if you never evolve them. Self-reliance becomes isolation. Independence becomes emotional distance. Strength becomes rigidity. And suddenly you're alone not because no one is there, but because you don't let anyone get close enough to matter. That's the breaking point. That's when the lack of support stops being something that happened to you and starts becoming something you recreate, not intentionally, not maliciously, but habitually, because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar trust. And if no one ever showed you how to be supported, you might not even recognize it when it arrives. You might test it, distrust it, push it away, or demand from others what you never learned to give yourself. This is why some people with unsupported beginnings become chronically disappointed. They look for external repair. They wait for someone to finally make it right, to fill the gap, to notice, to compensate, but no one can undo what wasn't given back then. They can only meet who you are now, and who you are now has a choice to make. You can keep searching for someone to retroactively save you, or you can become grounded enough to meet support without desperation. One path keeps you dependent on outcomes. The other builds internal stability. And stability is what changes everything. When you begin supporting yourself emotionally, when you validate your own experience, when you stop gaslighting your pain because others had it worse, you create a foundation that was never handed to you, and that foundation becomes the new standard. You stop overgiving to earn love. You stop tolerating inconsistency just to avoid being alone. You stop explaining your boundaries like they're negotiable. You stop shrinking to keep connections, because you're no longer trying to survive. You're trying to live well. And that's a different frequency. People who chose bitterness often don't realize they did. They think they're just being realistic. But realism without hope becomes poison. It hardens you. It narrows your world. It convinces you that everyone will disappoint you eventually. So you disengage first. You keep score. You protect yourself by never fully investing. But protection that costs you intimacy isn't protection. It's a slow isolation. The people who are made by their lack of support choose something else. They choose discernment. They become intentional with their energy. They learn the difference between privacy and secrecy, between boundaries and walls, between independence and avoidance. They let themselves grow, awkwardly, imperfectly, without an audience. They stop needing the past to make sense before moving forward. They accept that some chapters end without closure, and that acceptance is not weakness, it's maturity, because at some point, healing stops being about what happened and starts being about what you allow now, what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you normalize. And that's where your power actually lives, not in the story of being unsupported, but in the decision to no longer live unsupported internally. That's the shift. And once it happens, you don't need to announce it. People feel it in how you move, in what you don't chase, in what you no longer explain, in how you walk away without bitterness, in how you stay soft without being foolish, in how you choose peace without guilt. This is how being unsupported stops breaking you and starts building you, not by erasing the past, but by refusing to let it run the future. And we're just getting into it. At some point, something quiet clicks inside you, not an explosion, not a breakthrough moment people post about, just a realization you can't unsee. That constantly proving how strong you are is exhausting. That always being the one who handles it is lonely. That surviving everything alone isn't a badge of honor if it costs you joy. This is usually where unsupported people stand at a crossroads. One path says, keep going the way you always have. Don't need anyone. Don't trust anyone. Don't soften. Don't pause. Just endure. The other path says something far more uncomfortable. Slow down. Look inward. Take responsibility for what you were forced to learn early. Not to blame yourself, but to finally lead yourself. Because here's the truth most people avoid. When you grow up without support, no one teaches you how to receive. You might crave closeness, but when it shows up, your body doesn't relax. You brace, you analyze, you wait for the catch. You're alert even in calm moments, because peace wasn't familiar, chaos was. And until you rewire that, you'll keep confusing intensity with connection. You'll keep feeling bored around consistency. You'll keep mistaking emotional availability for weakness. This is how people stay stuck even after they've made it. They build careers, they achieve goals, they appear successful, but internally, they're still unsupported, still running on empty, still proving something to ghosts. The turning point isn't learning how to do more, it's learning how to stop, how to sit with yourself without distraction, how to listen to what your exhaustion is actually saying, how to notice where you're over-functioning to feel safe. Because unsupported people often become the backbone for everyone else. the dependable one, the fixer, the one who shows up. And eventually, resentment starts leaking in, not because you're ungrateful, but because you're giving from a well that was never filled. And resentment is a signal, not a flaw. It's your inner self saying, this isn't sustainable. Something needs to change. This is where being made instead of broken requires courage. The courage to disappoint people who benefit from your overextension. The courage to rest without permission. The courage to admit that being strong all the time is costing you. The courage to redefine who you are without struggle as the centerpiece. Some people never take this step. They romanticize their hardship. They cling to their toughness. They mistake burnout for purpose. They keep reliving the same patterns in different environments, different people, same outcome. Others pause. They grieve what they didn't get, not dramatically, not publicly, but honestly. They let themselves feel the anger, the sadness, the unfairness. They stop minimizing it, and in that honesty, something stabilizes. They stop fighting reality. They accept that support didn't come then, but it can exist now, in healthier forms, in mutual forms, in chosen forms. This doesn't mean you suddenly trust everyone. It means you become selective instead of closed. You don't overshare, but you don't isolate. You don't depend, but you don't push away. You learn to let people earn access instead of testing them unconsciously. And most importantly, you become the support you were missing. You learn how to self-soothe without self-neglect. You learn how to motivate without self-violence. You learn how to discipline without shaming yourself. You learn how to speak to yourself in moments of failure. This is the real reparenting. Not affirmations, not aesthetics, but how you treat yourself when things go wrong. Because unsupported people often become their own harshest critics. They internalize pressure. They believe mistakes equal danger. They don't feel safe failing, so they either overachieve or avoid trying at all. Both come from the same root, fear of falling with no one to catch you. But here's the evolution. You learn to catch yourself, not perfectly, but consistently. You learn that a setback doesn't mean collapse, that slowing down doesn't mean you'll lose everything, that asking for help doesn't erase your independence, that being supported doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And when that sinks in, your entire life recalibrates. You stop running from yourself. You stop proving. You stop hustling for worth. You move with intention instead of urgency. And that's when you realize the lack of support didn't destroy you, but it also didn't define you. It was a beginning, not a sentence. And what you build from here, that's the part that's yours. We'll keep unfolding this. There's a moment that comes quietly, not when everything is fixed, not when life suddenly gets easy, but when you realize you're no longer angry the way you used to be. Not numb, not detached, just clear. You notice you don't flinch as much. You don't explain yourself into exhaustion. You don't chase closure from people who never had the capacity to give it. You don't replay the same memories every time something goes wrong. And that's when you know. You chose the path that makes you, not the one that keeps breaking you in new disguises. Because the people who are truly shaped by a lack of support don't become loud about it. They become solid. They don't need to announce what they survived. They move differently. They pause before reacting. They protect their peace without apology. They let things fall apart if those things require self-betrayal to hold together. They stop auditioning for spaces that can't meet them. And maybe the most important shift of all, they stop seeing themselves as the exception. They stop thinking, this is just how my life has to be. They stop assuming struggle is the entry fee. They stop preparing for disappointment as if it's inevitable. That mindset alone changes outcomes. Because unsupported beginnings often convince you that ease is for other people, that consistency isn't meant for you, that something always has to go wrong. But once you build internal support, once you learn how to anchor yourself, you stop expecting collapse. You stop bracing. You stop living in quiet anticipation of loss. And life meets you differently when you're no longer waiting for it to hurt. This doesn't mean you never struggle again. It means struggle no longer defines you. It passes through. It doesn't take residence. You don't spiral. You don't self-destruct. You don't abandon yourself when things get uncomfortable. You stay with yourself. That's the real victory for those who grew up without support. Not success, not validation, stability, self-respect, the ability to hold your own life with care. And if no one's told you this clearly before, hear it now. You are not behind. You are not damaged goods. You are not difficult for wanting consistency. You are not weak for needing support. You were early forged, and now you're conscious. That combination is powerful. You get to decide what happens next, not from anger, not from lack, but from alignment. And as we come to a pause here, I want you to notice something. You stayed. You listened. You reflected. That alone says a lot about who you're becoming. Growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just this: presence, awareness, a quiet decision to choose better. If this message met you where you are, if it helped you see your path more clearly, then stay connected with us. Join the movement. Subscribe to Echoes of Enlightenment Oracle. We're walking this elevation together, and you don't have to do it unsupported anymore.